Good morning, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Lessons Learned, the dumbest thing I've ever done with money. My name is Suzanne, and I'm the head coach at G.R.A.C.E Financial Coaching. And today I have Vanessa Rutter-Jackson with me. Vanessa is a full-time realtor and part-time financial coach located in Williamsburg, Virginia. After spending 6 years in the Navy, Vanessa graduated with her master's degree from Old Dominion in Norfolk, Virginia. She then spent 7 years teaching elementary school. God bless her. In 2019, Vanessa and her husband went through Dave Ramsey's Financial Peace University and paid off $40,000 in debt. Vanessa and her husband are now parents to 2 beautiful children residing in Williamsburg, Virginia. Hi, Vanessa. Thanks for joining me.
Hi, Suzanne. How are you?
Good. So tell us about because I talk to a lot of realtors in our line of financial coaching work, and some of them don't agree with what I teach my clients. So how do you reconcile those competing schools of thought?
Well, I would say it's really important to have an emergency fund. It's really important to be prepared for things because like when we bought our first house in Virginia Beach, the home inspection was good, but as soon as we moved in, we had no heat. Like literally the heat went out, and we didn't have an emergency fund for that. We got it with a VA loan. And so, we got through it. And then when we sold our house and then moved to Williamsburg, it was summertime. And what like the air conditioner, like everything was good through the home inspection, the walkthrough. But then like when we moved in, the air conditioner broke.
We had to replace both of our units in our house. So Vanessa, for our listeners who are not familiar with the geographic area, Vanessa and I are pretty close to each other, less than an hour away. And when we moved into our house near Virginia Beach, the first summer, it was fine, but one of the units was it was 2 units here. One of the units was definitely on its last leg. And so I'm like, all right, well, we'll get away with just doing 1 unit. No, the younger unit died. And so it was $16,000 to do both units at the same time. Now, what was good was because we have 2 zones in this house, we were able to resize. So like the old units were actually, they were obviously much more inefficient, but they were actually too big for what the area they were cooling. So we actually got to downsize our units. So not only did we get more efficient units, we were cooling, the spaces with the proper amount of tonnage versus the old units. But that, so it made me feel better when I got the electric bill, but boy, paying that $16,000 for 2 units, that is, that's one of the biggest things I think new homeowners, or even, I don't even want to say new homeowners, like people who are just upgrading their house, like something's going to break, to your point. Did you guys have anything else break?
Those were the major ones. But I mean, even I wish I would have just known a little bit more about like having a conventional loan versus using the VA loan.
Oh, interesting.
And so, having the 15-year mortgage versus a 30-year mortgage. So I do agree with a lot of like Dave Ramsey's practices or like his teachings when it comes to like, saving for it versus just going into debt and getting the home. Yeah.
Oh yeah. Cause we would still be paying, that was 4 years ago we did those units. And if I had taken the company's financing, we'd still be paying for them. Yeah. It was like, and the financing back then, this is 2020. So it was pretty low compared to what it would be today. And we'd still be paying for it 4.5 years later if we did that route. So yeah, having the emergency fund is a big deal. And I agree with you. Sometimes, especially since you and I are both in the military community, the default is the VA loan, but that's not always the best route, is it?
No, it's not. Because you have the fee that goes with it. But like having the conventional loan is just like, you're going to have your 20%. You're not going to have to pay your PMI as long as you have your 20% down payment. So you're actually like saving money by doing it the right way versus jumping into it, which you can do with a VA loan. It's 0% down. It's very tempting to just like, I can go ahead and buy this home. I get a VA loan. Like I don't have to save for it. But then you also, if you're not in that habit of saving, then you're also not going to have like savings necessarily with the emergency fund. And then when something goes wrong, because it will, it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. You want to be prepared for that.
Yes, that's great advice. So take us a step back to when you and your husband went through Financial Peace University together. At that point, we had no kids or one kid?
Oh, no, we had 2 kids.
Oh,
So
you had
this was
both kids at that. Okay.
2019. Yeah.
Gotcha. And
Yeah.
what made you guys sign up for the class?
So we were both working, and I just had my son, and I'm like, this is really challenging for us, because we would have only ended up with a few $100s ahead with daycare for 2 kids. And it's like, I don't want to just be scraping by and us working 2 jobs. Like, how can we do this? How can we do better with our finances? And so I had prayed about it, and a friend had mentioned Dave Ramsey, and I'm like, who's that? And so I looked into it, and then found out about the class, and I'm like, I want to learn more. I was reading the book Rich Dad Poor Dad.
Oh, yeah.
But I didn't feel like it had a really good foundation to start out with finances. And I really wanted the foundation of like, where do I start? And that's what I like about Dave Ramsey's 7 Baby Steps. It teaches you, it's good for everyone. And you start at the beginning by like saving your starter emergency fund, baby step 1. Yeah. And so we were in the program, and then started going through it, and, it's challenging, but it's worth it. And so we were paying off our debt, making those sacrifices. And so I wanted to like teach it. Like once we did it, I was like, wow, like I want to teach this to other people. Like it's what I wish I would have had in high school, or, what my parents, like they didn't know to be able to teach me these things. Like they taught me the best things they could about money, and my mom helped me get a good credit score. But I just think that it would make such a difference if more people knew about how to have, how to use their money, and and the habits is really the biggest thing. It's like developing good habits and continuing to like better those. I mean, you don't have to start doing everything at once, because you're not going to be successful that way. But just small habits from the very beginning would make such a difference in a lot more people's lives.
Absolutely. The just the action of knowing that you can't spend everything that comes in every single month. It's got to be allocated to savings or sinking funds or emergency funds or whatever you're working on at that moment. How many people have we seen that are just spending every dollar that comes in? Everything that comes in is going out. None of it is going to your savings or to paying yourself or whatever you want to call it. It's challenging. And then my favorite thing is lifestyle creep. And when you make more money, magically you start spending more money.
And that's what we did. Yeah. Because we both went to college, felt like that was the right choice. We were the first college graduates in our family.
Wow.
And, a friend had said, like, you need to start like, when you get a raise, like save that money. Like, don't act like you get the raise, like save it and invest, put it into your retirement. And I didn't do that. I was like, I'll do it later. I'll do it later. And then later became like too many years.
Yeah. Yeah. And then, every once in a while I'll get the opposite, where people are putting too much into retirement, and then they've actually handcuffed themselves, because to take out of retirement is, penalties, fees, taxes, all that fun stuff. But typically we end up with the situation of people not putting enough in, and getting to age 40 and calling one of us and saying, I need to put more in retirement. And we're looking at it and going, where are you getting it from? Because, you've now lived this lifestyle where there's not much to cut from, and there's not much to allocate to those areas. So speaking of silly things we've done with money, the whole point of this show is to help our listeners understand that we've all made mistakes, even though we would be considered the experts now. So Vanessa, what would you say is the dumbest thing you've ever done with money?
So when I was younger, so I met a guy, and I was getting out of the military, and we got engaged, and it was really exciting, thinking like this was the one. And at the time I was getting my college degree for teaching, and he was getting his pilot's license. And, it sounded great because, his career would be a pilot and I would be a teacher. But the problem was that he needed so he needs someone to co-sign for a student loan for him to be able to get his pilot's license.
Oh.
And so it wasn't just me. It was also he had to ask family members, and we went and asked those family members together. And I just really believed in him and was excited for us, for him. But a long story short was that we didn't stay together. And
Mhm.
he, throughout the years, he didn't want to like pay it. So I was very blessed in the fact that I didn't have to end up making any payments on it, but it was so
Mm.
stressful throughout the years. Like his mom ended up paying it for him. And I
Oh
was
my
really
gosh.
shocked. And so it was just stressful the whole time thinking, is his mom going to make the payment? Is the payment going to be made? And then having kids and a husband, I'm having to explain this to my husband, like, hey, I'm having to keep in contact with my ex because we have a student loan together. And I reach out to my ex to ask if he'll take me off of it. And he won't.
Oh.
Like and I could have gotten off of it, like according to the company, but he just didn't want to release my name from it. And I'm like, why? Like, why would you not do that? He's like, oh, I just don't want to.
Oh my gosh.
Like, what a
That's
jerk.
terrible. Yeah, that's terrible. It's interesting because the last few recordings of this show that I've done, most of the mistakes have revolved around emotions. And like sometimes it can literally be a calculated risk that went wrong, right? Somebody who invests in the wrong thing in the stock market or gets caught up in Robinhood and just, hits an extra zero on there and whatever it is fails. But a lot of the conversations recently have been around emotions. And when you're with someone who you think you're going to marry, there's a lot of emotion attached to that. And anybody could get caught up in a situation like this.
Mm-hmm.
Now, in terms of did he finish the pilot's license? Do you even know?
He did finish his pilot's license, but then once it came time for him, he felt like he needed to go to another school in order to be competitive in the pilot world, which that may have been true.
Right.
And at that point, he just kind of gave up on it and started doing something else, and he still had all the debt with it. But and it wasn't until his mom passed away, and I had to keep in touch with him.
Oh man.
And anyways, he did end up paying it off with his mom when his mom passed away. But again, it was like I still had to like really be like strategic with our conversation, like, and I was very blessed that he said yes. So,
oh, that is rough. Yeah, it's definitely the emotions that are attached to and it caused you to have to stay in touch with him for that much longer, right? A part of your life that was like, I don't really want to be dealing with this anymore.
exactly. Yes.
Well, I'm glad he was responsible enough to pay it off when his mother passed away. What would if we could go back in time, or have you actually ever shared this story with any of your coaching clients?
I have not, no.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, I think this is a really important story because with our coaching clients, we hear stuff like this a lot. And sometimes there's guilt and shame associated with it, but I have a client right now who comes to mind where she was married and her husband bought a vehicle together and then they got divorced. And guess what? He stopped paying on it and she didn't have the vehicle. So she couldn't even turn it in, right? You couldn't even take it and turn it into the dealership and say, cancel this loan. Here's the vehicle back, blah, 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 blah. And that dollar amount, but she had the ability to log into the loan. And it ended up being this extremely stressful, almost checking it daily. And imagine what that stress and anxiety does to us, right? Of having to go in and check it every day. Did you have access to the loan online or anything like that?
Yeah, so that's how I was able to find out that he could have taken me off as a cosigner because
Oh.
the payments had been made on time for a certain period of time, and he just didn't want to. And it was just like, why would you not? Like, I just don't want to. Like,
Yeah.
so then
Yeah.
I would go in, I would check it. I would have to I reached out to his family members, reached out to him. And like you said, it was a lot of stress and frustration. And I didn't have control of that because I was a cosigner, and he ultimately made the decisions, and I had to be kind. And a lot of times when I didn't feel like being kind and having conversations with him, because I knew if I wasn't kind about it, like, yeah,
It could have gotten ugly.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah. No, I think that's a good strategy. Definitely. I also remember having a conversation with someone who used to intern for me when I worked in property management. So years ago. And he had said something on a social media platform about, can someone and he was significantly younger because he was my intern. Can someone co-sign on this Jeep loan for me? And I texted him on the side. I said, what the hell are you doing? What are you doing? And I had a good enough relationship with him. This is before financial coaching. This is before anything. I had a good enough relationship with him where I felt I could say to him, you know, what are you doing? This isn't the smart move. And I think he responded with something like, oh, my grandmother said she's going to co-sign. And I said, why would you do that to your grandmother? And it ended up starting this conversation. It was a short conversation, but he didn't do it. He ended up not going through with it. He ended up not having, because if he was going to his grandma, that means, and I knew his mother, that means his mother told him no too. And I was like, I know your mom. If your mom told you no, do you really think this is a good idea? And he ended up not going through with it. And it was 1000% the right move. Because what it did was it created urgency around the fact that he needed a newer vehicle. But once he decided, or people said no to him, we're not going to co-sign, he had to figure it out. And sometimes we need that stress and that sense of urgency to learn these lessons or become better people. And, you know, someone like, you know, this guy is frankly a narcissist. And thinks that the world revolves around him and that he doesn't have to do anything for anyone else or ever do anything good. But yeah, it's a scary proposition. And so this, you know, this doesn't just apply to someone you think you're getting married to. This applies to like your family members, right?
Absolutely.
I had a client over the summer. She's not even done with her degree yet. She's going for a master's in physical therapy, which is fantastic. I'm so excited for her. And she got a phone call from an older sister who doesn't have her life together and who has asked for small amounts of money and paid back everything that my client has asked her to pay back. So I'll give her that. But she called asking for her to co-sign on a loan, and we had to take an entire session to go over why this isn't a good idea and why this could not only damage my client who is in the middle of her master's, why this could damage her not just now, down the road, how this could come back to haunt her. And by the way, what's the effect that it's going to have on the relationship, right?
I was just thinking about that. Yeah, when it comes to your family members, like, yeah, the stress. And like in my situation, like I am not tied to that person. They live in a different state, but family members are totally different. Like you will see them the rest of your lives.
Yeah. Or you may not, and money would be the reason that you don't.
Right.
That stress, that strain on the relationship would be the catalyst for that. You know, it's definitely a very sticky, scary area to get into. But it's really important to talk about.
Absolutely.
Because a lot of people think it's their responsibility to help a sibling or a parent. I had one of those. That was probably one of my first clients. Couldn't figure out why he was over budget every month. And then all of a sudden I find out, I'm trying to remember how we even figured it out. I was like, what's this $200 or $250? I don't even remember the amount. And he's like, oh, that's what I sent to my mom. And I was like, that's not on your budget creation sheet. What are you talking about? And I don't know where he thought the money was coming from. Like, did it just come off of a tree and he decided to give it to his mother? But she lived, oh my God, Vanessa, 2,000 miles away. She lived practically on the other side of the country. And it took probably 5 or 6 conversations, but he finally said, I can't give this to you anymore. It actually hurt him more than it hurt her, if that makes any sense. Like, he was so worked up about having the conversation, and she was like, oh, okay. But the fear of the unknown, right? That stress that we're putting on ourselves internally, thinking our mother is never going to speak to us again.
That's huge.
Yeah. Yeah. It's so crazy. Well, the final question for you, Vanessa, is if you could go back in time, what would you do differently?
I would not co-sign that loan for him. Like, you know, he had family that, and I guess I would talk to him a little bit more about, like, you know, could you just wait? Like, could you get a job right now? And because he had used, I think he'd used some of his GI Bill, or there was something the military was able to like help out with. But, you know, could you just wait and like build up the money versus, taking out, like, co-signing.
Yeah.
Because if you're co-signing for something, like, you don't have the money for it, and that's why you need a co-signer. Because
I think that's a good point to make, because the bank or the institution or the lending company or whatever it is not asking for a co-signer because they're bored. They're asking for a co-signer because this person statistically who's applying for the loan statistically is probably not going to be able to pay it back.
Right.
And I think a lot of people don't realize that that's why they're asking that question. Hey, can you get someone else so that in the likely event that you stop paying on this, we have somebody else to go after?
Mm-hmm.
Are we doing anyone any favors in that situation?
No.
Yeah. It's crazy. It's but yeah, it's a lesson that has been talked about here on this podcast, and you and I have heard crazy stories about it. And it's going to continue to be done. And hopefully this will prevent somebody out there from, you know, giving that yes to someone that shouldn't be given that amount of money.
Yeah, and another problem with it is that it's so easy to co-sign. It's not like somebody talks you through, you know, what you're really signing up for. Maybe like very briefly, but like, you know, it's like, oh, here, just sign this. Like, we can get the loan. Like, it's very easy to do, and it's very hard to get out of.
Yeah. I don't even think I realized it was that easy. So it's just a matter of literally, because you're not the main person on the loan. So they're probably not wasting their time telling you the you know, what the loan is all about, the rates and all that kind of stuff. You can just sign your name to it.
I know, I think I was given the information, but, you know, it's just really quick and like, all right, go ahead, fill this form out, send it back to us, and we'll set you up.
Crazy. And I'm sure now it's all just digital signatures. Mm-hmm. There's not even any paper to print out anymore. So no, this is a really, really important lesson, Vanessa. And, you know, like I said, we've talked about it on here before, but, you know, recently it seems like the emotional, the stuff that money makes us, that our emotions drive us to do with money. It's just so important for people to hear. And I really, really appreciate you and your honesty today. And if anybody wants to reach out to Vanessa, all of her contact information is going to be in our show notes, including her website. And thanks again for joining us, Vanessa. We really appreciate it.
Thank you. I want to just thank you for asking me, well, not asking me, but letting me be on your podcast. And thank you to your contribution to others as a financial coach, leader, mentor, and getting the group face-to-face on an annual basis, and willing to share and help others on Mighty Networks.
Yes. Vanessa and I attend an in-person meetup with coaches every single year. So if you're a coach and you're listening to this, you're invited, and you can reach out to either of us for more information. Thanks again.